Hi, everyone. How are we doing tonight? Good. My name is Tara Baldassarian, and I'm going to sing an Armenglish song that I wrote in Goris 2 summers ago. And I actually meant to record a music video on that same mountain this past summer, or in the fall. And it was the same week that they started bombing Goris in September. So it just is a testament to how threatened our indigenous lands are, whether it's Armenia or Artsakh. And I'm very impressed with Aryan. He just learned this song like 2 minutes ago, so he's gonna harmonize with me because my friend's stuck in traffic, so give it up for Aryan. Their best, I'm alone at last, never knew the said I had lost, always been somewhere with someone else but me. Lying here on this lead, hold between my toes and hair, everything is perfect and still. Out here, out here. Here, out here, lying naked on the sod, turn my morning to the sun. Peace around me makes me wanna cry. Artsakh that slide like seeds down below and in between. Smile at them and wait for them to grow. Out here, out here, here, out here. Why should I leave here? My heart belongs here. Why should we leave here? Our blood belongs here. Out here, out here, here. Why should we leave here? Out here, out here, here, out here, out here.
Hello, everyone. Bari galus, bari ereko. Welcome and good evening. My name is Elise Manukian, and I'm a radio and podcast producer at World Affairs. I work on our flagship show on Shifting Ground, hosted by Ray Suarez. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to our program this evening about an issue of great importance to me and to many in this room, the humanitarian crisis facing the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, a region known to Armenians simply as Artsakh. So we have a very busy program, but I'd like to say a couple of thank yous really quickly to get us started. So first of all, to our panel who came here to lend us their expertise and came on such short notice. We really appreciate it. I'd like to thank Tara and Aryan for their beautiful singing. I'd like to thank our host, World Affairs, especially the program's team, for their unflagging support and collaboration on this program. I spent a lot of time in December reading about the siege of Artsakh, of Nagorno-Karabakh, and felt like many people watching calamities unfold that I wanted to do something. And I approached my team, and instead of saying, Elise, you're crazy, we have a program with Ray Suarez next week, we don't have time for this, they immediately stepped up, and I'm very grateful. Thank you. And then I have to thank the Armenian community of the Bay Area, especially Dr. Yervan Soryan and my mother, Dr. Mari Manukian, for helping me pull together this panel on such short notice again, for spreading the word about the event, and for graciously donating food and beverages, which we hope all of you will be able to enjoy with us after the program for an informal reception. And most importantly, I would like to thank all of you for coming out so late on a Wednesday, for braving the traffic to come here and be a part of the discussion. And so many of you generously made donations, which we are really appreciative of. Without people like you, we would not be able to provide programs like this for the community and for the public. So really quickly, I'd love to tell you about World Affairs, tonight's host. It's been my home for the past 2 years. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit forum that explores international forums and global challenges. Behind every global challenge and every political story, of course, are the people who are directly impacted, their stories, their hopes and dreams, their desires for freedom. So that's why I was hoping to kick off tonight's program with a short film produced by Tara Bagdasaryan, who's an Armenian artist from Oakland. She was also the one who was singing just now. So without further ado, I'd like to ask that we lower the lights and enjoy this film.
Ամիսներ անցած է, որ չեմ կրած Այնքան բաներ բադահեցան, որ չեմ գիտեր ուր գե սկսեմ Կսեն, որ կրելը կբուժե Բայց ինչպես կբուժե, երբ մղձավանջը տակավին կշարունակվի I haven't exhaled since that morning. Tears feel hollow, dry outlines where water was, transiting thoughts in constant collision, veering off every intended path. Still, not calm. Frozen, so much to do. I can only manage small bursts of action that leave me gasping for more disconnected stillness. Hovering off the ground, grounded by flimsy threads, strung emotion tethering me to reality and earth. The world used to be a planet, but now I see it's a map. A place covered by lines someone drew. I trace my fingers along the lines of your face, your peaks of white, your rolling round rhythmic waves, your wise smiles, cracks of a new morning. Morning star, streaks of white phosphorus ablaze in the night sky. They scorch the lands they claim to own and love. I wonder if the trees, rocks, and rivers could speak, where their allegiance would lie. Lines of smoke, burning homes, young faces of hope. I listen to their mothers, stories of sons that paint, play, build, protect, defend, die. I sit and see their hollow tears, dry outlines where water was. Lying naked in your mountains, your forests, rivers, the lines of my body merge with yours. You hold me in your lap, caress me with winds I hear before I feel on my skin. Here I am safe. I'm held, invigorated, capable. We've seen thousands of new years here, moments swimming past the present and joining the songs of our ancestors, ephemeral echoes of truth. Truth they want to kill. I throw a cloak over you before I leave, so you may stay unseen and untouched by hungry hands who do not know your touch. Նույնիսկ եթե հերուենք քու երկերդ կլսեմ քունիս մեջ քու հովդ պատուհանս կփանա ու ինձի հետ կգանչե որքան որ փորձեն չեն կրնար մեր սիրտերուն կապը կտրել
Ես Վարդուհի Տիգրանի Գրիգորյանն եմ, 17 տարեկան 2003 թվականին եմ ծնվել։ Ծնվել եմ Հայկավան գյուղում, Հադրութի շրջան Հայկավան գյուղում։ Այդտեղ մեծացել, դպրոց գնացել, հենց այդ նույն օրը սեպտեմբերի 27-ը։ Այդ ժամանակ պատերազմը սկսվեց։ Բոլորս խառնվեցինք իրար, փախել ենք անտառներում, մնացել ենք դրսում, մինչև մայրս ու մեծ քույրս գա, շատ վախեցած էինք։ Երեխեքը լացում են, ահավոր վիճակ էր մեր մոտ, ես էլ էի լացում, չգիտեի, ես ինձ զսպեի երեխեքի ձենը կտրեի, թե չգիտեմ, շատ ահավոր վիճակ էր։ Եկել ենք, հետա տեսնում ենք ինչպես ենք կրակում, այդ կրակոցները մենք տեսել ենք։ Այդ ամենը քույրս էլ է տեսել, մայրս էլ է տեսել, թե ինչ շատ վատ են եղել, ես էլ եմ շատ վախեցել, մենք բոլորը շատ վախեցած ենք։ Գյուղապետը մեզ ասաց, որ դուրս եկեք, գնացեք Երևան։ Չնայած որ մեքենա բան նորմալ չկար, մենք մի ֆորդով ենք եկել մոտ մի 4-5 ընտանիքով մի փոքր ֆորդի մեջ տեղավորվել եկել ենք։ Մենք կորցրեցինք մեր տունը, մեկը ինչքան էլ լավ լինի, վատ լինի, մենք մեր տունն ենք ուզում, որը հիմա չկա թուրքերի ձեռքերում է, ու ոչ մենակ մենք ենք այս իրավիճակում հայտնված, այլ բոլոր ղարաբաղցիները, ովքեր որ հիմա այստեղ են ու տարբեր տեղեր ցրված։ Ու ես շատ եմ ցավում, թե մեր համար, թե նրանց համար, ու մեր զոհերի համար։ Ամեն անգամ այդ եմ ասում ու լաց լինում, չգիտեմ, շատ դժվար է քո տունը, քո հողը թողես ու դուրս գաս, կապ չունի, ես էլ ամեր հող, ես էլ ամեր հայրենիքը, բայց որտե ծնվել ես, որտե մեծացել, այդ հողը քեզ քաշում է դեպի ընտե, ու մեր հետ ոչինչ չենք բերել, ոչ շոր, ոչ կոշիկ, ամեն ինչ ունենք, թողել ենք, թե տանվեշ կլինի, թե սնունդ, կենթանիներն է, այդ այս տարի ուզում եի ավարտել, որ գնայի Շուշի ընդունվեի խոհարարական սովորեն, էջ ստացվեց։ Այս պատճառով մի քիչ ցորված եմ, չեմ կարողանում էլի նորմալ կենտրոնանալ դասերիս վրա, ուշքը միտքս մեր տղերքներն են գնացած տղաները, որ զոհվեցին, չգիտեմ։
Okay, let's give it up for Tara for just her beautiful film. And thank you so much. Now I would like to hand off the program to this evening's moderator, Dr. Yervan Zoryan, who wears many hats, but among them is the chair of the SF Bay Area Task Force, Artsakh Task Force.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you. Good evening, all. And thanks a lot for being with us this evening on a weekday. As Elise said, it's not very easy. I know many of you were in traffic, so thanks for being here. Today we have a comprehensive program. We'll talk about the past, we'll talk about the current situation, and also we'll try to foresee the future a little bit. It will be a dialogue. We'll get your questions, we'll interact on it together. Before doing so, though, I'd like to first thank Elise for pulling this together in a very short time. Elise, truly, wonderful job. Thank you so much. But also I'd like to thank Tara. What you heard today was from her music-wise and film-wise, it's really very impressive, but very touching as well. The program will be touching because we're talking about a difficult situation, a challenging situation. Many of you are familiar with, not all of us, so we'll be covering a little bit of the history to start with. It's a crisis, it's a humanitarian crisis. The lifeline of Nagorno-Karabakh, the lifeline of Artsakh has been cut for 44 days already. The lifeline for food, the lifeline for medicine, for energy, everything passed from that line. It is cut, so today we need to find out why, how, and what can be done. To do that, we'd like to go backwards a little bit. Of course, this is not a new situation. It has been there for some time. It's a crisis that just revealed 44 days ago, but there are past steps before that. For that, we'd like to invite Professor Derderian. Zovina Derderian is with us today. She's from UC Berkeley. She teaches history there in the Department of History. Also, she runs today the Armenian Studies program. Zovina?
Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, in 10 minutes, I will attempt to present 100 years of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So I'll be going rather fast. To understand the roots of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, we need to turn to the 20th century and the quickly changing context within which the conflict emerged. A region that for centuries had been ruled by empires was now experiencing the emergence of nation-states. These new nation-states, namely Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, were attempting to draw their borders along ethnic lines in a region where ethnic and religious diversity had existed for centuries. And I'm trying to change the slide. Sorry. Okay. So, for example, on this map, you can see the Elizavetapol gubernia, an administrative region in the South Caucasus of the late 19th century that was part of the Russian Empire. In the darker areas correspond to the dense Armenian presence, whereas the lighter gray areas represent the population of Tatars, the name that was given to what we now call Azeris or Azerbaijanis. To give a more concrete sense of this geography, the area I've circled in red is now part of the Republic of Armenia, whereas this area circled in green is roughly Nagorno-Karabakh proper. In the early 20th century, the new nation-states authorities were claiming right to lands in the South Caucasus based on the relatively novel ideology that sovereign right to a territory should be determined based on demographic ratio, that is, the ethnic majority of a region. However, as we can see on this map, the ethnic groups were not coherently gathered in neatly bounded areas. The current capital of Georgia, Tbilisi, had a major Armenian population in 1918. Yerevan, the current capital of Armenia, despite having an Armenian majority, also had a Turkic population. Nagorno-Karabakh had the majority of Armenians in the mountainous area, whereas in the surrounding plains, the flat areas, there were Turkic populations. Topographically, Nagorno-Karabakh is much easily accessible from the east, that is now Azerbaijan, then to the west, that is Armenia, because of the mountainous terrain that exists between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan regarded not just the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh, but also Zangezur, this area that roughly the red area of the southern part of the Republic of Armenia, as well as Nakhichevan, this area that now is part of Azerbaijan and falls between the Republic of Armenia and Turkey, and is one of the reasons why Azerbaijan wants a transit road towards Nakhchivan from Azerbaijan. The disagreements about the delimitations of the borders led to outright military conflict between the three republics, and in their very short existence of about 2 years, the three republics were in constant wars. The situation took a dramatic turn when the Red Army arrived in Azerbaijan in April of 1920 and took over the administration of Azerbaijan, and later in December, the Bolsheviks took over the government of Armenia. In the early 1920s, Bolsheviks oversaw negotiations that took place between authorities of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan regarding where the borders of these countries were to be drawn. When at the same time the Bolsheviks wanted to appease to all of the local ethnic groups in order to establish their power in the region. There was, in 1921, vehement disagreement as to in which republic Nagorno-Karabakh should decide. But eventually, with the decision of the Kavburo, that is the Bolshevik authorities in the Caucasus, the decision was made for Karabakh, that Karabakh would remain part of Azerbaijan. In 1923, the Kavburo made the decision of granting autonomy to Nagorno-Karabakh. In this new setting, the autonomous region of Karabakh would have a local government that would, however, be subordinate to the Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan. The decrees that would define the form of this autonomy did not specify ethnicity in any way. So although the format of the autonomy was established to appease the demands of the local Armenians, in writing there was no indication that this was going to be an Armenian autonomous region with Armenian as one of the official languages of this region. However, for a while, through this scheme, the question of Nagorno-Karabakh was silenced. The next era of major discussions and arguments surrounding the conflict occurred in 1960, when under Khrushchev's administration, there had been a move towards liberalization and even encouragement of local cultural nationalism. So while in the Republic of Armenia, there were commemorations of the 1915 Armenian genocide, which was a novelty. There was the building of the monument commemorating the Armenian genocide. There was, as well as cultural and literary revival. The question of Karabakh also came to surface. Calls for unification happened in Nagorno-Karabakh itself with demonstrations that in 1963 resulted in violence and ended up in 18 Armenians killed. So Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh were discontent for several reasons. They complained that economically, they were not getting the same resources that the Azeri regions and the Azeri population was receiving in the government by the government of Azerbaijan. They complained that Azerbaijan was intentionally hindering connection between Armenia and Karabakh, and they were not given opportunities to develop their language and culture in Nagorno-Karabakh. For example, there were no publications of books in Nagorno-Karabakh until 1963, and even after that, only around 10 books were published until the late 1980s. This fact is shocking, especially when taken along the fact that Shushi, one of the important towns of Nagorno-Karabakh, was a major cultural center in the 19th century, and there were dozens and dozens of books and newspapers published in Shushi from the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century. Finally, and perhaps most crucially, Karabakh Armenians worried that Azerbaijan was deliberately trying to change the ratio of the demographics of Nagorno-Karabakh. Particularly in the 1960s and 1970s, the increase of the Azeri population compared to the Armenians was rather drastic. Decades later, in the early 2000s, the president of Azerbaijan, Heydar Aliyev, who had been the first secretary of Soviet Azerbaijan in the 1970s, in a way to praise his actions vis-à-vis Nagorno-Karabakh, admitted to have led a policy of increasing Azeri population in the area. He said, quote, "I tried to increase the number of Azerbaijanis in Nagorno-Karabakh, and the number of Armenians decreased." Such demographic engineering was done through the opening of new institutions and factories. For example, as the first higher education institution was established in Nagorno-Karabakh in 1970, Azerbaijani students from nearby regions, instead of being sent to Baku, were sent to Karabakh for their education and eventually found residence in the region. It was also around this time that Azerbaijani academics began to actively produce historical narratives that would detach Armenians from the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. They did this by claiming that Azerbaijani lineage went back to the Caucasian Albanians of the medieval era, who also had a kingdom in the region. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Azerbaijanis began publications that represented medieval Armenian monuments, specifically churches and monasteries, as being Albanian rather than Armenian. These are fabricated narratives that today are actively being used and expanded upon by the Azerbaijani state in order to justify their claim to the territory. So we see that while in the 1920s, the disputes around the right to territory would largely revolve around demographics, in the late 20th century, history in this region began to serve as another tool through which to lay claim to a territory. While the calls for for the Karabakh-Armenia unification of the early 1960s had died down, they resurfaced in the late 1980s during Gorbachev's glasnost and perestroika. In January 1988, Karabakh Armenians sent a petition to Moscow asking for a referendum to take place in Karabakh to determine its future. Hopes that the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh could be resolved in favor of Armenians were reignited once again. In February, first the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh demonstrated, which followed by large demonstrations in Yerevan. Hundreds and thousands of people came out to the streets in Yerevan to call for the unification of Karabakh with Armenia. Soon after, violence broke out in various places in mainland Azerbaijan. The first larger case of violence occurred in Sumgait, an industrial town on the Caspian coast in Azerbaijan. On February 28th, riots began in Sumgait and lasted for 2 days, as a result of which there were 31 Armenians killed, which followed with pogroms of Armenians and from Azerbaijan. This was a turning point, as Armenians took it as a direct message that Armenians could not, under any circumstances, survive under Azerbaijani rule. As the republics became independent from the Soviet Union in 1991, the nature of the resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh issue changed. The framework of negotiations was taken over by the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which both Armenia and Azerbaijan had joined. At the same time, however, military activities on the ground were intensifying and erupted into an outright war that lasted till the ceasefire of May 1994. At this point, Armenian forces had gained not only control of Karabakh, but the surrounding Azerbaijani districts. These two maps show what Nagorno-Karabakh attached to Armenia looks like on the left. I don't know what happened here. Okay, thank you. And on the right, you can see Nagorno-Karabakh with its surrounding regions. By this point, almost 350 Armenians had been forced to leave their homes in various parts of Azerbaijan. Almost 700,000 Azeris from Armenia and Karabakh and its surrounding regions had to leave their homes and were given refugee status by Azerbaijan, something that was not replicated by the Republic of Armenia for the 350,000 Armenians that were forced out of Azerbaijan. In the coming decades, Azerbaijan would use the refugees as one of its cards of negotiation in the coming 3 decades. In other words, any resolution to the conflict had to include the return of the refugees. The surrounding areas of Nagorno-Karabakh remained under Armenian control until the 2020 war. Some of those areas were inhabited by Armenians. Of course, with the 2020 war, they were also forced out of those regions. I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zavinar. That was wonderful. We got a good impression of the situation, I think. We saw this recent past, how did it evolve during the Soviet era and beyond. However, today's situation is a little bit different, especially with the corridor being blocked, the blockage that we see today. Today we are honored to have with us virtually the State Minister of Artsakh. The State Minister of Artsakh is the Prime Minister position. He has been there, that is Rupen Vartanyan. Rupen is well-known entrepreneur, well-known philanthropist, an activist, a global Armenian. I had the privilege to personally work with him on the Central Board of HBU for a number of years. Rupen, welcome. Good morning to you. It's very early. I'm pleased that you are able to join us. Rupen, we'd like to know the situation in Artsakh now. Educate us a little bit, where do we stand, and what are we trying to do? And later I'll ask you how we can help in any way possible. Please go ahead, Rupen.
Good morning, Edward. Good morning, everyone. Good evening. I have in San Francisco, right? It's a pleasure to talk to you about the situation in Artsakh. We have a 46 days blockade, and it's winter time in Artsakh, -5, -10 in the night weather, which create a lot of challenges for us because 46 days we don't have access to the right to transport people outside of Artsakh, except a patient who had a serious problem with health and was by Red Cross. We had around 3,000 people who've been separated from families, including around a couple hundred kids who were stuck in Armenia or were stuck in Artsakh because their parents in Armenia or vice versa. We had a serious issue with electricity and gas. The electricity was cut off in January, and we are using now only electricity we got from internal resources, which is not enough. This is why every 2 hours the electricity is cut off. And the gas was cut twice in December, now again. And we don't have a fuel, and because of no gas also, the people have no transportation, we cannot use cars, except we have a small reserve for cars, special services we need to use. We had a problem with the food, and food delivery is limited. We just recently, in January 20, introduced a coupon system for 5 products, which people can buy in the shops, but we don't have any vegetables or fruits or fish or many other products. Basically, not only food, we have a lot of other products which we cannot deliver to the people who use every day. We also facing serious challenge of blockade, not only with having problems with the medicine, with the products or with the gasoline, but also the entire economy is shut off because of the no supply, no demand. We have very limited shops is open. We have no construction industry working because we cannot provide any supply materials. The mining business also shut down, which provide thousands of jobs for people who's living now in Artsakh. Basically, entire economy is in collapse because of the situation. The same time, I would say, honestly, I'm so proud to see the people courage and willingness to stay in these very difficult conditions and continue being ready to fight for our own independence and the right to live in our own homeland. This is why this crisis definitely creates serious pressure from Azerbaijan. It's not only physical blockade, it's also political blockade, and they trying to do their best to really create serious pressure for people who live in Artsakh that they give up their rights to live by their own rules, by their own principles, by their own values. But because of this pressure, it's created very strong resistance, and people become unified and they came together more closer. Sorry, I'm a little bit wrong with the coughing. And people said, no way, we have been in this fight like was recently described in many, many decades, 35 years. In February, we'll celebrate 35 years of beginning of the Karabakh movement, Artsakh movement in 1988. And people said, no way, no way. We will continue to fight for our own rights and we will not give up this. So the mood is quite good despite a lot of challenges, especially in the villages. I will say the most difficult part of the life is people who live in the city. But at the same time, everyone understands this is the reality. So we're okay. We also got a lot of support, emotional from outside our Armenian communities and from Artsakh. The Red Cross and the Russian peacekeepers is the two vehicles who allowed to go back and forth by the road, which was now controlled by Azerbaijani eco-activists, like we name it. But they are not eco-activists, really. It's a military service people, plus students, which was asked to be there. Just for your understanding, it's during this 46 days, around 400 cars pass this checkpoint. If compared before blockade, it was one day we got more cars was entering to Artsakh compared now during 46 days. This is basically the situation. If I can go more detail, but I think it's giving them. I think it's enough for just explaining you where we are now.
Yes, Supreme. The situation is very difficult. Where do you see us going from here? What are the steps to come?
Yeah, we definitely need to create more pressure to Azerbaijan from the point of the information flow. We were trying to distribute and present Israeli information to the entire world. We believe this will be very important. Azerbaijan cannot succeed their plan to say it's my internal problem. Nobody cares about this. This is why first information pressure. Second, we with the help of Armenian government, we apply with many courts and UN and many other organizations requesting their reaction to the situation, because it's in the end 120,000 people in blockade, from which around 30,000 is kids, and this is the real humanitarian catastrophe which needs to be recognized by public, but also by all international organizations, and including the court. By end of January, in Human Rights Court in Hague, will issue a decision about the situation. We got Euro Parliament issue a resolution. We got Blinken recently create pressure to the Aliyev with Macron made a couple call, and also the France has a very strong pressure to the Azerbaijan, Russia, and a couple times Minister of Foreign Affairs and others also talk about this. This is why we believe it's diplomatic, legal, and information pressure is very important. From the blockading, we believe the airlift is one of the solutions, which we are working very hard to create airlift opportunity for the people who live in this situation. And it's possible without Azerbaijan permission to land the planes with the humanitarian product. It's just needs to be decision that needs to be done by special organization in the UN. Also, we are requesting sanctions against the Aliyev and the other people who organized this whole operation, and we believe it needs to be punishment for the Aliyev regime, who should not needs to be not allowed to travel to Davos and other places. People need to create pressure to the leaders of the country, saying it's unacceptable what you're doing. In the end, the goal is I would say, I hope you understand me right. Despite this looks a very difficult situation, we believe it's created better opportunity for us to explain the world why we cannot be part of Azerbaijan, why we have a right to self-determination, why we, in a crisis where basically the president of Azerbaijan said, or you accept our rules or you leave Artsakh. Basically, we said we want to stay in our homeland and you cannot push us out, have a right to live by our own independent rules. Create more pressure to Azerbaijan to finally and the international world to recognize what is impossible we live under Azerbaijan controlled by any model which can be offered. And this is the end of the goal, to get independence.
Understandable. Rupen, in closing, is there any particular request you may have for us here in San Francisco, in the US, whether the public at large or the Armenians? What could we do to help?
Like I said, it's very important to keep informing public societies, which live in a world where there's a lot of things happen simultaneously, a lot of crises. But this is a very important situation and not being different. That's why we appreciate about a lot of effort was done by Armenian community. We just recently organized Artsakh Friends program with people from 44 countries, random people, non-Armenian origin, but they are our friends like Baron Artsakh or Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever, or many others, very famous people, joined the discussion about the situation in Artsakh. We, like I said, is to continue create all the pressure from legal and public side to the Aliyev regime. The second airlift corridor, it's a debate that can be really important to hear the voice from you to your government and to also other international organizations. We are sending a lot of letters to different top official people in Europe, in the United States, in Russia, requesting to be take attention to the situation. And the third is the humanitarian support. We need a lot of things, products, and services. So we need, and to be honest, and so humanitarian help is very welcome because we had a serious issue about how we can stay long run in this place without real having jobs and having opportunity to produce anything and to be self-sustainable.
Very good, very good. Thanks a lot, Rupen. Any single hot question you want to ask the state minister before he leaves us? Yes, sir.
I have a question. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for coming to this discussion. Ruben, I have a question. What are the requirements that may ease up the tensions on the border and the blockade of the Nagorno-Karabakh? Are there any requirements that Azerbaijan is making and we can meet them or we cannot meet them? So what are the next steps? Thank you.
They played quite dirty game because formally it's not the Azerbaijan government. Formally it's, like I said, it's named eco-activists who blockade the road, but it's all organized by Azeri government, and they request to have access to the mining business in Artsakh to control what's and how it's managed, which we said is no problem. We'll be delighted to provide access to international experts to get information about how the mining business operates in Artsakh, but at the same time, we want with the same expert who check the Azerbaijan mining business, because it's a joke with the Azerbaijan, which have never had any aid for protest. Now we have ecological activists who blockade the road. The second, they now demand to have a checkpoint in the road and to check all the cars carrying any commercial products. And they also request that I need to resign and left Artsakh.
That's one of the demands, yes. Okay. Yeah, we understand these demands that may change over time. They are dynamic demands, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Rupen, again, thank you so much. We took some good time.
All the best.
Thanks a lot.
Stay strong.
Good luck. All the courage. Okay. Now we know a little bit more the status. We know what the situation is in the population and the authorities in Artsakh. We have with us an esteemed set of panelists who will join us on stage, and they will be answering some of our questions, your questions, and we'll try to analyze it a little bit further together. Okay. So I'll invite back Zovinar on stage, if possible. Please, Zovinar. We have with us David Agopian. I will not be reading their bios because you have it on the flyers. David Agopian is a former UNDP official, director, senior expert. So he has lots of international expertise. He has lived in many countries, in Somalia, Afghanistan, Syria, and some others. So he can bring us the international perspective. We have with us Roxane Makasjian. Roxane comes with, again, historic knowledge, but she's an expert of genocide education, and she can help us compare the current situation with what Armenians have seen in the past, and how do they relate, and if there is any continuity there. And we have with us Stefan Pastemelci. Stefan is in the media domain. He's a media strategist, so he can, again, help us understand what can be done through the media, what is being done and what can be done. We all have microphones? Yes, we do. Okay, excellent. Again, welcome and thank you for being with us. Let's start from this side. Roxane, I mentioned that you work in the genocide education domain, and you can do that analogy of the continuity. The continuity in our minds or in facts, where is it?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Yervan. The organization that I lead, the Genocide Education Project, we're tasked with helping high school teachers incorporate genocide into their curriculum. Of course, this organization was established by descendants of Armenian genocide survivors. So that is the case study we have the most expertise on, but it's very important for genocide education for teachers and students to understand that studying genocides not as isolated events, but in comparison with each other, studying the parallels that exist between them, and studying the stages that all genocides have in common is an important way to empower students to recognize, and these are our future leaders, to recognize when genocide is in process, and be able to stop it before the mass annihilation takes place. And so scholars have defined these stages of genocide, the last one being genocide denial. As long as genocide denial continues, a genocide continues. And we see that more and more all too clearly in the case of the Armenian genocide. So more than 100 years now of genocide denial on the part of Turkey and its partner in crime, can we say now, Azerbaijan. We see that the genocide not only continues, it emboldens those successive perpetrator governments and other potential perpetrators of genocide, showing them that you can do this with impunity and you can attempt to finish off the story. In fact, so many of the statements we've seen on behalf of President Erdogan and Aliyev, it's not just their continuing actions that show clear genocidal intent, but their statements that then confirm it. When you have, before the Azeri-Turkish attack on Artsakh in 2020, when you have, in those months leading up to it, Erdogan saying that to the effect that he is going to finish the work of his grandparents, we saw where that led. And then after the attack, after the war, when he's celebrating with the Azeris at a parade in Baku and references Enver Pasha, one of the triumvirate that planned and carried out the Armenian genocide, and saying, now we are finishing the work of our ancestors. All of that combined with all of the actions, the way the war was conducted, and all of the war crimes that happened during the war, and now we have, and these statements, and now the blockade, shows clear genocidal intent, which is the key feature of the United Nations definition of genocide. The intent to destroy, in part or in whole, a nation, people, religious group, etc. So we see in the blockade that the attempt to cut off Armenians of Artsakh from the world and deprive them from the necessary utilities and etc. for survival, and the attempt to push them out by starvation or an invitation, as recently Aliyev said, at least we're not closing the road. I mean, in effect, he said, to the outside, anybody who wants to leave, please leave. So the invitation to empty Artsakh of Armenians, the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention actually was the clearest on this out of all the genocide organizations, International Association of Genocide Scholars, Genocide Watch, as was mentioned earlier, and the Lemkin Institute. I'll just read in order to conclude kind of the clarity that what is happening is genocidal. All of what was said, including all of those long-term actions during the Soviet era of Artsakh, the systematic discrimination that reduced the population and cut them off from prosperity. They said, the history of the region makes Armenians particularly vulnerable to a recurrence of genocide in the 21st century. And they called the blockade a criminal act which intends to create terror and unbearable conditions of life for the population of Artsakh. These events are not isolated events. They are instead being committed within the larger genocidal pattern against Armenia and Armenians by the Azeri regime, separating Artsakh from Armenia and isolating and terrorizing ethnic Armenians residing in Artsakh are both methods of implementing further genocidal policies in the region. They further call for
It's
sanctions.
clearly, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's clearly an attempt, Rupen said so as well, of depopulating Artsakh and depopulating these 120,000, maybe in stages, but it's definitely a strong position they're taking. I'll turn to you, David. If that's depopulation, if the intent is to make it a second Nakhichevan with 0 Armenians, legally, aren't we able to do something there, given your international experience? We have instruments. We have instruments, sanctions, others. What could apply in this case?
Okay, so first, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here at the World Affairs Centers. Eventually, I feel almost at home because I spent 27 years with the United Nations in 15 different countries, so World Affairs is something I had my own contribution to. There are two parts to this question which I want to reflect. There is like what we have now, which we call blockade or we call the siege, right, of Nagorno-Karabakh. So the siege sounds like a medieval term. Genghis Khan was doing sieges against the people, or Constantinople was besieged by the Turks, and things like this. And 21st century, it was very hard to comprehend. These things still could happen now. So, but it is happening. It happened a few times before also. For example, Sarajevo was besieged for almost 3 years, and 20,000 people were killed. But the UN, meantime, and UN humanitarian assistance was coming. So 13,000 flights came to Sarajevo with food, with medicine, with many other things. So when I was in Syria, and Syria is the closest case from many different sides, and I will elaborate a bit on this. I was a UNDP director representative in Syria for 2 years plus. It was the middle of the harsh civil war. Bombs from Russians, American tomahawks falling on Damascus and stuff like this. So you get almost fireworks, but it was like terrible. I mean, we were not being like touched, but you see how tough the reality is on the ground. At the same time, and many people, I mean, the victims, like 500,000 were killed in a few years only. So what happened then? So there was a discussion that humanitarian there is a humanitarian prerogative. I mean, the places which are being, let's say, besieged or blockaded or locked, I mean, there should be, lives should be preserved, and the humanitarian aid should come, even if the regime of Assad, in that case, was not supporting. They were saying, give everything to us, we'll give whatever people needed. But UN and the world community was saying, no, we don't trust you, you don't treat your people well, and there should be a forced delivery of humanitarian aid. And again, I was part of few convoys where hundreds of trucks, Red Cross, UN, etc., were delivering aid to the people living under worst impossible to imagine conditions. But it is happening. So, and interesting enough, just 2 weeks ago, UN Security Council, one more time, and this is, I think, the 15th time, endorsed the 2642 resolution, which is about to continue providing aid to the Syrians being besieged in northwest of Syria. So the same Security Council, the same Russia and the West on extremely different sides, but managed to get on Syria a unanimous decision after many discussions. So this is like a broader introduction, which I'm saying. But when it comes how we get out of this and where the direction, but to your specifically your question, because in none of the other cases, like in Syria's civil war, we have about 6 million people who left the country and another 5-6 million who were internally displaced, and there was no immediate way. Because what UN mechanism UN has, it is sanctions against economic sanctions, sanctions against the leaders of the states, individual personal sanctions, or maybe like military intervention, for example. And the military intervention, UN does not have its own army, so it should be someone else's army who is willing to put the army there. When it comes, let's say, for situation right now in Artsakh, the way I personally call it, it is tactical, planned ethnic cleansing. Or it could be scrolling annexation. They hit here, they hit there, and step by step, people eventually, I was talking today with a good friend of mine in Martuni region in Artsakh. He said, probably if they open the border and give us a window, let's say you have 1 week to leave Artsakh, it may well be possible that 25% of population will leave now. And then they come one more time, and step by step, they populate. But during the war, these things happen, and there's no any, let's say, for example, in Yugoslavia, it happened, UN managed to bring some people back, but not all of them. In our war, of course, the war from 92, 94, many things happened, no one came back to the place of origin. So there's no simple black and white solution to this, but to me personally, and I was part of the discussions where individual sanctions against the leaders of the state, in this case it was Somalia. We negotiated with the president saying if you don't do this, UN and the US and the European Union will have the following sanctions against you, against your family assets, against your property in Europe, etc. The guy listened, and we found some common ground to move forward together. So if you allow me, I want to say a few words about Aliyev also, which for me is a very special world leader. And I feel that it is not very appropriate the way the global community is treating him, because people, I don't know how many you know that there are in 21st century, there are only 4 heads of the states who got the authority, the power from their fathers. So one is North Korea, Turkmenistan, Syria, and Azerbaijan. At the same time, Aliyev family owns probably 50% of property in Azerbaijan, huge. And out of almost 200 billion revenues from oil and gas, people are saying again that half went to some family accounts also. There is OPPRP, this journalists investigating corruption. They get a special super prize to Aliyev and the family in 2012 as the most corrupt president of the world. And then Putin comes after, and some others also are there. But what the point I'm trying to make, Assad, they don't invite Assad to Davos to come as a global statesman and to speak about the future world affairs. They don't invite North Korea leader. But Aliyev, not Assad, was in Davos a week ago.
It's oil.
And he was talking about his vision of alternative energy routes to Europe and his vision in 2050, how the transit between, and he was well respected, accepted, as if all these negative points I described about the family and him are not there. And for me, I mean, how the world community is closing the eyes on so many vivid facts, this is an issue.
That's a good way of bringing the question to Stefan. Stefan, media should make these things clear, right? There is a clear autocracy, dictatorship versus a democratic country.
Yeah.
Armenia has been democratic for many years. We changed so many presidents, so many prime ministers, velvet revolution. How can we not see that in the media?
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back, I mean, to your point, I mean, it's oil, right? That's why he was invited to Davos, right? What's going on in Europe right now, and they're trying to look for new energy resources. So, of course, they're going to roll out the red carpet for him. So he's using that to his advantage. Same in Saudi Arabia, right? So we see those like dictatorships have special privilege when it comes to certain resources, but that's all I can say about with Davos. But in terms of taking a step back in terms of the media, I think as a community, Armenians have not done a good job, right? And what I say about that is, you know, from a policy standpoint, we've done an excellent job in influencing Washington, right? We have a lot of great organizations based in Washington, and for years I've done, you know, just a tremendous job in trying to impact and influence policy. But when it comes to media, right, Ruben mentioned this, like the flow of information, right? That was second thought, right? We never really put any resources into that. Azerbaijan has, right? They've taken the Turkish playbook out of this, right? And what I mean by that, for years as an Armenian, we all could remember us fighting for the word genocide, right? And how the media would never use the word genocide. They would say supposed or alleged, right? Turkey did an awesome job in terms of making it a nuanced debate, right? They made it more complicated than it had to be. And media bought into that. And what we're seeing with Azerbaijan is that they're doing something very similar in terms of hiring agencies to go out there and to own the narrative, right? I don't know if you followed the recent news in England, but there was an agency that Azerbaijan hired that basically went out and co-opted this scientist to put out a paper basically supporting these eco-activists in Artsakh, right? And it turned out that, it just blew up in their face, right? So that to me was a little, getting a little bit of a sneak peek into the machinations of how Azerbaijan is working, right? And, as a community, I think we have to do a better job to really go out there and own the narrative. We have to define things for media, right? Because right now, they're just listening to what Azerbaijan is telling them, and they're running with it. And it's frustrating as a comms person because I look at media as that third rail, right, to hold people accountable, right? They need to go in and do their due diligence and investigate, dictators and corruption. And for some reason, they're not doing it with Aliyev. And it's frustrating because, as you pointed out, I mean, we're trying, Armenia is a fledgling democracy. So that is a narrative that I feel we should be making more of a case of, right? Like, we are a democracy in a sea of dictatorships, whether it's Erdogan, right? Whether it's Aliyev, right? We're that shining light, if you will, of what it means to be a democracy. And for years, everyone would say that Turkey was that symbol, right? And it's not the case. But again, they've done an excellent job in going out and defining it in the marketplace.
Thanks, Stefan.
Yeah.
It makes very good sense. We heard the point of view from all our panelists so far, but I'd like to do some questions. We have microphones around. Please, stand up, introduce yourself, and give us the question.
Hi, I'm Gilnora. I have a question about media.
Yes.
I realize that we haven't done a good job, but how do we make our voices heard, and how do we get the truth out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we have to get ahead of the news cycle. And what I mean by that, we were very, reactionary, right? In the fall of 2020, when the war started, I mean, we were just caught off guard. We were blindsided, right? We would go out and try to pitch certain storylines and angles to reporters and editors. And my personal take is that Azerbaijan had been laying the groundwork for that prior to their invasion, right? So as a community, we have to start doing that right now, right? Not wait for the next, and obviously with the blockade, that's taking precedence right now. But once this blockade is lifted, it's going to be something else, right? This is just the pattern, right? They cut off the gas last year, right? So this is just their way of intimidating and strong-arming their way, to get us out of the region. So what I've been trying to preach to, people in the community is to go out and talk to editors. I mean, we've been doing that, but it's very difficult when, you're going up against a country like Azerbaijan that has a lot of resources and is paying a lot of agencies out there to do that work.
Absolutely. Yes, please. I have a question also for the media. The microphone, maybe. Yeah.
I also have a question. It seems like when I listen to the news, they're very influenced by what the government says. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing what happened with Ukraine. All of a sudden, it's sad what happened, but all they're talking about is Ukraine. So why is the media so influenced by what the government's policy is rather than what the reality or the real thing is?
Yeah, access. Yeah. They're giving them access, right? When it comes to like letting reporters into their country, right? Azerbaijan was doing that, right? If you look at the New York Times coverage, I mean, they had exposés of, Carlota Gal, who's their Ankara bureau chief, going into Artsakh and visiting on the Azeri side of what was happening, right? That was Baku rolling out the red carpet to her, right? It was giving her access. We weren't doing that, right? And that's what we have to do more of. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Please.
that's the way the media works. Yeah, it's unfortunate. They're a business at the end of the day, and what they want is access, right? They want to sell newspapers. They want to get eyeballs, right? And Ukraine is a great case in point, right? It's compelling, right? It's this like country that's under siege right now, right? So Zelensky is a celebrity in his own right, right? So if you give, right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we have something to do on the government side as well, not only media, but
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. It all comes together. Yeah.
yes.
I also think more and more over the course of the last few decades, news outlets have cut back substantially on having an actual bureau presence in different parts of the world. So they're depending on government communications more than they used to. They don't go out and verify information. I was just listening to a scholar who's written a new book about the Russian media representations of Artsakh over the years, and after he's done a 9-month review of all of the articles, he found that they were more true to what had been going on the ground in Artsakh. Because of the proximity, because you had Russian reporters who could be there and see for themselves what was happening, and they had also the benefit of the language. So when media in the outside world is cut off, much easier to take the word of the government spokespeople.
Mm-hmm.
And just to our point, with Azerbaijan, right? It's a closed society. There's no free speech there, right? There are no independent reporters, so they have to take the word from the government.
They don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice.
Let's get a question from the right side. Yes.
Yes,
Mary,
thank you. No, great panel. I want to pick up on the threat of Ukraine again, because I think this is part of the story that we need to spend a lot more time talking about. The history and the tension over the last 30 or 100 years is real, and that certainly is part of the motivation for why Azerbaijan is doing what it's doing. But the way the world is responding is really much more, intersecting with Ukraine. They're invited to Davos not just because it's oil, but because with the Russian invasion, the Russian oil is no longer flowing into Europe, and Europe doesn't want to freeze like the Armenians in Artsakh are freezing. And so it's that, and yet at the same time we have the other story, which is freedom and democracy and fighting for your land and all of that. Is it possible to reach any I won't even say peace, but cease until Ukraine is resolved? I mean, just talk a little bit about that intersection from the current moment.
Would you like to address that? No? Yes, David.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I was thinking now about the Ukraine comparison, also the PR part. Putin for sure spent more money on communication against Zelensky, but Zelensky won the communication at least and the military probably also. And there is and the world somehow managed to gather together and join forces because Ukraine managed to present their position in the way the people understand the position. So to me also, in our Azerbaijan caviar diplomacy plus whatever big money they spend about, but if you don't have a clear message, if you don't have the appealing to the hearts of the people address, not necessarily you are going to win even if you spend 10 times more money than Armenians. So being sharp, being smart, and being strategic, I think, and to me, this is the way Ukrainians managed to do so far, is something which we have to learn and probably try to do from our perspective also. And for sure, we are clearly Armenia democracy versus autocracy, Artsakh versus, again, part of the, which declares self-independence, and they don't have to do anything together with Azerbaijan because they cannot accept the rules which are established in Azerbaijan. They are very different, the culture, the politics, the freedom,
Yeah, it's like with Zelensky, right? He's a celebrity in his own right? Before he was in politics, he was an entertainer, right? So he knows how to manipulate the media, right? And it's it's basically astonishing what he's been able to do, but Pashinyan, right? Well, we haven't done that, and I'm not faulting him for that, but with Zelensky, I think people are falling head over heels for him. He's Time Man of the Year. He's getting invited to speak at the Grammys, right? I mean, you can laugh at that, but in some ways, it's genius, right? He basically is owning the media war when it comes to what's going on between him and Russia.
Absolutely. So let's take a question from then. We can give you.
Once you mentioned Pashinyan,
Yes.
my name is Georg. Thank you to
Yes,
the
Georg.
panelists for a wonderful presentation today. So I'd like to go directly to the core of this issue, of the problem with Artsakh.
Yes.
And which is not only on my my opinion,
closer,
is a mixed signals going from the government of Armenia today. You know probably very well that in Prague, Armenian Prime Minister recognized territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and thus that signal goes not only to Azerbaijan but to all over the world. So with this signal, trying to establish what we can do, what tools we have to use in order to take Artsakh from that difficult situation, the world should also see the official opinion of the government of Armenia. And by the way, Armenia has a great diplomatic tool regarding the United Nations. For many years, Armenia has been contributing to the world's international peace and security by sending their troops to different UN peacekeeping missions. And I know that Mr. Hakopian knows that. It's UNIFIL, MINUSMA, some other in Kosovo, NATO-led, and Afghanistan. So having those tools, we can easily make our voice heard from the part of Armenia if they be more proactive in their diplomacy. So, so my question probably, it was a comment, but the actual question, do we have a power to galvanize energy here in diaspora and not to push, not to put a pressure, but to urge Armenian government to be more proactive and to probably change its stance? Thank you.
Thank you. David, you're closest to you live in Armenia typically, you're visiting us here, thank you for that. But how do you feel about that?
I think the recent approach, because before the war, it was all about Artsakh recognition, independent state, and all the other ingredients. And then Kosovo case, Taiwan case, Somaliland case, and many other cases. For now, because we've lost the war militarily, we don't have capacity to resist. Russia's security umbrella is no more protecting us. So we are in a very weak situation now. And to continue claiming this, especially, is not, we don't have enough means for this. And right now, we approach from the government is let's separate pure humanitarian issues, preserving the Armenian ethnos at the territory which they used to live for the last 3,000 years to have on their lands. And then after 10 years, 20 years, we start talking about more politics. So for now, the approach, whether right or wrong, I mean, but this is the reality. The approach, and which is also supported by European Union, Americans, Russians are saying, Russians also are even stronger saying this. Let's not talk about the status of Karabakh at all now. Europeans are saying, no, you accept the integrity of Azerbaijan and start talking about autonomy there. So not necessarily, none of them is something which we are very happy with, but this is the reality which we need to move. Because if we take the worst scenario, it's total ethnic cleansing. Okay, so I'm talking from Armenian side.
This is the view from Armenia.
Okay, so
you're asking about diaspora, then we'll ask Stefan or Roxanne to see if... Okay. Microphone?
Bring me back again. You're asking what... how,
If diaspora can do something to influence.
To galvanize...
Influence.
Unfortunately, from what I've been hearing from the political advocacy organizations in Washington, D.C., the communications with the Armenian government have been deteriorating to the point of non-existence now. And if somebody knows differently, please speak up. And so, to be honest, I don't know right now how to, how and if the Armenian government is opening its ears to having a change of direction of policy.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to use what we've done with genocide recognition over the past couple of decades, right? The diaspora has been really, impactful in that area, whether it's holding marches like in Times Square on April 24th. I think we have to shift gears now, right? And talk and kind of marry the two, right? We've talked about recognition of the genocide, from 1915. I think moving forward, we need to use that as a springboard to talk about why we need to prevent the next genocide. And I think the diaspora can do a better job. Well, not a better job, but we can do a job in terms of using that kind of like platform and to emulate that.
Yeah, one quick comment though. We should not limit ourselves to think about Artsakh only, because the situation is not only Artsakh. Once that is depopulated, then there is the next step. There is the corridor being asked, not a corridor. Supposed to be in the signed documents. It's a transit route. Now they're calling it corridor. Corridor has totally different meaning. Now they're calling it Zangezur corridor, and they want protection on it. They want to have presence and so on. So once you give them that, then there's the next thing. Then the population of Armenia who were from Azeri origin, they'll demand to come back. So it's a continuous thing. We should not. Razmik, then David. Yes.
Can you speak to regional powers around Armenia that can influence the outcome of the situation? Again, specifically Iran and primarily, what could they do? Because they don't want Azeris to win. That's very clear.
They don't, but it's, if you look at the politics, it makes sense for Iran to like get involved, right? But in some ways, that will be counterproductive if we do that and that story gets told, right? And I'm just, from my perspective, because I'm in the media, right? You don't want Armenia aligned with Iran, right? Especially here in the States, right? That's what the Azerbaijan's been very, successful at doing, is linking Armenia with Russia, right? Which is mind-boggling because Aliyev and Putin are more alike, right? Dictators like to stick together, right? That's why they signed a deal 2 days before Russia launched, or I think before Russia launched their invasion in Ukraine. So we have to be very mindful of that. I agree. I think Iran has a role to play here, but I still think that this idea of like regional players, Europe, right? Europe has a role to play here, right? If we want to see democracy flourish in that part of the world, Armenia has to be the country they look at, right? They have to look to them as that blueprint, if you will. And, it's a tough situation to be in.
And Europe and the US should help Armenia resolve this and not go to the next war. Because any follow-up war will bring Russian back, will bring the Iranians to the game. It will be worse for the West. So if there is no war, it's much better. David.
Thank you to all the panelists for being here. Perhaps this is a question for David. He might be able to give some context to this. My question is, do we have any insight as to why the peacekeepers are not doing more to clear the corridor based on the November 9 Agreement 2020? It is my understanding that it's supposed to be under their mandate to ensure the free passage of that corridor. We can come up with all kinds of debate as to why. We might have an idea why they're not clearing it, maybe political or whatever their goals are. But if there's any way any one of you might be able to share some insight as to why they're not doing more to clear it. Thank you.
Yes, I was myself involved in a number of countries, UN peacekeeping missions, and all the process which happens before and the mission fielded. So it is first thing to trigger this is UN Security Council resolution. And then after you need to have a volunteer country which decide that I can provide so many troops, and then they start packing them together and send to the country. In this case, I mean, the decision was with Russia without having international peacekeeping troops on the ground. And so it happened. And then there was some slow discussion about internationalizing this peacekeeping force on the ground, which always need to have a UN Security Council mandate. UN Security Council is the only global body which has authority over the countries. It can decide that we are going to send by force this army to your country and do the following. So it didn't happen, first because Russians did not want to happen, and they was promised 5 years, and I was there. I spent a few months in Artsakh when First General Muradov said after 5 years we're going to stay another 5 years, so no worries. I personally was very skeptical that even the 5 years they will last. But many people believe that they are going to last for decades. It didn't happen, especially with the war in Ukraine. Now I know the current government in Artsakh are trying to get international mandate from UN Security Council for the Russian peacekeepers. And with all the current divide at Security Council with Russia, the probability for them to US, UK, France, and whatever to give the mandate to Russia is probably close to zero. But at the same time, there is a very smart diplomacy, which we all need to play a lot to make sure that, because to me, this is probably the path to solution, to have specific countries, at least France, they approached first time, they were not willing, but it was before. Maybe France, maybe Norway, maybe, I don't know, Bangladesh or someone. At some point, they will manage to bring them in, or India, for the sake of, because India is getting into closer relations with us, but Azerbaijan for sure will have objections on this. But there is a very proactive strategic approach to many countries and try to form, because the only way to keep Armenians in Artsakh, and I frankly and unfortunately don't see too high probability for this to happen, but the only way is to internationalize the peacekeepers and to have the mandate for the next 10, 20 years, saying that they stay here, we don't talk about the status, but we talk about the people and their life.
Very good. Yes, it's a very clear point as well. I think we do the last question, please.
Thank you very much. I have two short questions.
Two half ones.
Two?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And it was very impressive to hear the state minister and to know from the first line what's going on. But I want to ask this question: what is the main takeaway from this meeting? And if we break into actionable items, what everyone from here should take with him when we'll go out from this door, what we should do? It's very frustrating that Aliyev is ruling the world by its oil, but we are a smart nation. We should plan something. I don't know, maybe doing some protest in front of UN will have some results, of in front of media agencies. I really don't know, but maybe we can discuss and find some way to do something.
We'll take your quick question and we'll ask each panelist to suggest something. But what Rupen already suggested is influencing the public opinion, right? He mentioned it already. He said, do your best to influence. How we do that, whether we do it via advocacy, whether we do it via media, other things, social media. There's so many ways of doing it. But let's ask our group what else can be done. Roxanne, two words. You have 2 words?
Dig deep in your heart. Decide what your priorities of your life are. Just look at your profession, your skills, and find where you can apply it for the benefit of the progress of Armenia and the life of Artsakh.
Thank you, Roxanne. Stephen?
Yeah, from my perspective, more from a media perspective, read, right? If you see an article that you disagree with, write a letter. Right? Write a letter. It seems so trivial, but it does have some impact, right? The editors do read it, and they will comment on it, and they will take note of it. So that would be my advice if you see an article. Don't reach out to the reporter directly and yell at them, because we've had people do that before, and that's counterproductive.
Just a
but
letter.
just a letter. Write a letter to the editor.
Thank you, Stephen. David?
Yes, I see.
Microphone.
Like Ruben has the approach. From one side, we need to increase international pressure on Aliyev and Azerbaijan. From the other side, we need to help the Artsakh people resilience and survival ability. And hopefully, we'll have enough time, until the pressure comes to the turning point, for them to continue being there, to enable them to continue their life. But this is a two-side story.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, David. Zovina?
I guess as an educator, what I would
Yes.
encourage is to stay informed, seconding what the panelists said, and also making sure that you're following reliable sources, right, of information, because there is a lot of misinformation out there as well.
Absolutely. And we're doing some homework already, so advocacy-wise. So we approached two of the congresswomen who cover the area from Oakland and Silicon Valley, and we can hear their statement right away.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and I proudly represent California's beautiful 12th Congressional District in Northern California in the East Bay, includes Oakland and Berkeley, California. I'm back in Washington, D.C. fighting on your behalf, so I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you all tonight, but I'm with you in spirit for this very important discussion. As the former chair and now ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations and a member of the Congressional Armenian Caucus, I have been a strong, long-time advocate for humanitarian support and recovery needs arising from the Artsakh conflict. As we all know, Artsakh is enduring a growing humanitarian crisis caused by Azerbaijan's illegal blockade of Lachin corridor, Artsakh's only humanitarian lifeline to Armenia. I strongly condemn Azerbaijan's blockage of the vital corridor connecting Armenia and Artsakh and call for its immediate opening. With extreme fuel, food, and medical shortage, this is now a dire humanitarian crisis. I'm pleased that we were able to successfully secure language in the fiscal year 23 funding bill to ensure that we have a comprehensive strategy to address the humanitarian needs of the Armenian people, and look forward to continuing to work with the administration and with you to get this done. We were also, with your help, able to secure $60 million for Armenia to support economic development, energy independence, and the democracy, and a requirement that the Appropriations Committee is consulted by the Secretary of State prior to delivering security assistance for Armenia and Azerbaijan. We have a long way to go, but I can assure you that you have an advocate for you in Washington fighting for the humanitarian needs of the Armenian people. I have visited the beautiful country of Armenia and witnessed the resolve, beauty, and strength of the Armenian people. We cannot let them down. I hope you have a great event. I look forward to our continuing work together. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to address today's forum about the ongoing blockade of the Republic of Artsakh. As the only member of Congress of Armenian descent and a member of the Congressional Armenian Caucus, I'm deeply grateful to the World Affairs for raising awareness about the humanitarian crisis and facilitating important conversations about how the United States should respond. I believe the U.S. has a moral responsibility to do everything in our power to bring an end to this humanitarian emergency. And that's why I joined colleagues in writing to Secretary of State Antony Blinken and USAID Administrator Samantha Power last week, urging the Biden administration to apply maximum pressure on Azerbaijan to lift the blockade. Our letter specifically calls for the U.S. to impose sanctions against Azerbaijani officials and send monitors to the region to gain first-hand knowledge of the situation on the ground. We also urged the administration to consider all available options to provide humanitarian aid to Artsakh, including coordinating an emergency airlift of food and medical supplies. My colleagues and I have also repeatedly called on the administration to immediately suspend all U.S. military aid to Azerbaijan to ensure that U.S. taxpayers are not subsidizing the human rights abuses of the Azerbaijani regime. We will continue working closely with the administration to bring an end to this inhumane blockade. Last September, I had the honor of joining then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in traveling to Armenia to demonstrate our support for Armenia's democracy. In meeting after meeting, Armenian officials provided candid assessments of the security challenges posed by an emboldened Azerbaijan. It became clear through our conversations that the survival of Armenia's democracy requires that the U.S. and our democratic allies stand up to Azerbaijan's aggression and play a more active role promoting regional security. It's critical that we answer this call. I will continue doing everything I can to ensure that the U.S. stands with Armenia and Artsakh, works to bring an end to this horrific blockade, and helps to secure peace in the region. Thank you again for having me join you this evening.
Thank you. A phone call, an email, a letter, you get statements, you get action. You can call Blinken, you can call Biden, you can send letters. There are so many things that we live in a democracy we can do. So keep that in mind. Let's discuss it further at the reception. Thank you all. Thanks to all the fairs. Thanks to Elise. See you there. Thanks.